My guest today is Katie Keate Johnson. Katie has spent the last decade working in B2B sales. That includes 7 years with LinkedIn Talent Solutions, where she was a sales rep, but also a sales leader. After LinkedIn, she was the first sales hire at an early stage company called Rue, where she built the sales team up to 15 members. Then she was the head of sales at Betterment, selling their product to small businesses. At the start of 2022, Katie decided she wanted to take the leap to be a founder and is currently working on a new venture that is focused on a community solution for B2B onboarding. With Katie, in person from New York City, where she is based, we talked about the difference between the buyer and the product persona and how to align sales strategy with a product strategy so that the sales team attract the right type of customers. She gives her opinion about the famous dilemma of sharing the roadmap with salespeople, but also tells us she does want to have an input on the roadmap. If you want to learn some sales skills that are also useful for PMs, as well as get some efficiency tips, stay tuned and enjoy this episode. Hi, I'm your host, Magali Pellissier, and I'm a product manager. Welcome to Product Perspectives, the podcast for product people that gives a voice to their stakeholders. Each week, I show you the other side of the product. I interview the people who contribute to making products a success. They are engineers, writers, marketers, support analysts, UX designers, or even salespeople. Not only will I give them the credit they deserve, but will uncover what makes a good product and a good product manager from their perspective. Stakeholders management is a key skill for product managers. So just as you are obsessed with listening to your customers, let's hear from your stakeholders. Today is very exciting because I am in my first episode recording face-to-face, and actually it's from New York City.
Yeah.
So. Welcome, Katie, to Product Perspectives. How are you feeling today?
I'm great. It is the nicest day of the year, maybe of the entire year in New York. So you picked a really good time to be here in New York. Excited to chat with you today.
Well, it's a shame we're actually stuck in a meeting room. But I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun.
Yes.
Cool. So you are a sales leader. Is this a job you've always wanted to do, or how did you end up working in sales?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of people who end up in sales, it was not the career path that I thought out for myself. It kind of has the judgmental ring to it, which is changing, and the software industry is changing, but certainly not anything that I ever envisioned. So I fell into sales, actually started my career in recruiting. So I went to a really intense undergraduate experience, and this was, 2007 before tech really took off, and everybody was doing investment banking, consulting, medical school, law school, and it completely turned me off. I was not interested in like some of those like typical fields. I knew I wanted to do something interacting with people. My first job out of college was as a recruiter, which was really fun. And then sales attracted me because I thought it was a similar skill set, but I saw it as a path where I could really support the lifestyle that I wanted. And I knew that it was a path where if you were successful, the material benefits could certainly follow, and then fell in love with it once I started working in sales.
Right. So what exactly do you mean by sales? Are you doing business development, or is this something else?
Yeah, so I think of sales as new business focused and customer acquisition from a B2B space. That's my world of it. Business development, I think of now as a lot of evolving into partnerships, right? So for me, a business development title at a technology company is more about aligning strategic partnerships, maybe doing M&A type of work. You see it a little bit for like early stage, like a sales development rep. Sometimes it's called a business development rep. And that stage of the life cycle is more about booking meetings, trying to do cold outreach and book meetings. But for me, I see sales as that first touch, booking a meeting to, contract signature in the door for new prospects.
Okay. And how do you do that outreach? Where do you find those new prospects?
Yeah, I think it's really become harder than ever in some ways. It's like there's more data than ever before. There's a lot of new providers out there you can use, but prospects are getting, bombarded on a lot of channels. So, I think even, let's say 10 years ago when I started at LinkedIn, it was very straightforward, right? Find someone's profile, you could find their email on a lot of those sources, and if you had a good message, you were getting a response. In this day and age, people are getting more distracted than ever, and I think it is really important as a go-to-market strategy. Of course, you're going to, work on inbound, work on those things, but see if you can find buyers with a little bit more intent down the road. How you and I connected through a networking group, right? That's a great way to make an introduction. Word of mouth referrals through your prospects. It's really important to think about how you can differentiate yourself, find where your buyers might be living, engaging them there so you can cut through the noise a little bit more, because I think we're continuing to see cold emails still work, cold calls still work, but buyers are more distracted than ever before. And you need to think about how to differentiate them and engage them in really clear ways.
So when you say some of it doesn't work, so what is the ratio of calls or outreach that actually work?
I think it's so hard to say. I mean, if you want to look at a sequence and a core enablement tool, right? Which there's a lot of them out there. Outreach and SalesLoft, I think, is the main ones, right? You should be going for open rates of minimum 40 to 50%. And if you can get a reply rate of 5 to 10%, you're doing pretty well. And maybe one of those replies turns into a meeting that month. So there's usually a lot of volume involved. If you even want to get to, let's say you get 100 people in that sequence, maybe one of them is playing out in terms of the volume involved in terms of a clear cold outreach. And that's why I think you're seeing people be a lot smarter. There's certainly very expensive data that you can buy from an intent perspective, but really trying to live where your buyers are, engaging in communities, understand that, engaging in discussions that you're finding online, right? Figuring out the problems they have before they come to your product is, I think, the most effective way. Now, if you can really understand your buyer's problems, then you know how to target that specifically.
So if a lot of it is online, I think that's why we're seeing more and more inside sales teams. So what do you think of this trend?
Yeah, I think, built my career mostly in inside sales. We did some in person, but I feel like it was really the trend of the future anyways, as products are driving a lot more growth, right? We see that in PLG, a very common acronym, but I think it was really started even before that, right? I sold LinkedIn Recruiter, which was a product that was not built on a traditional PLG motion, but the product was so good, we didn't need to do a lot of the relationship selling that existed in the past. So field sales is so contingent on relationship. And I think when your product doesn't differentiate itself, that relationship is really important. When you have a product that differentiates yourself, the relationship is a nice add. It's a great buy-in. It's certainly a way to bring a lot of business, but it isn't as essential to the process the way it is when it's more of a commoditized marketed industry and you don't really have an innovation behind that product.
Okay, so we touched on PLG, which is product-led growth, a bit later.
Yeah.
Great. So you mentioned this buyer persona. As a product manager, I have user personas. So what do you see as differences between a buyer persona and a user persona?
Yeah, I would say there's probably a few things. To me, buyer persona takes into account the company a bit more. So, the firmographic information, are they a certain industry? Are they maybe 50 to 100 employees? Maybe they're feeling the pain points of a Series A company versus a Series C company. So I think the first layer you're going to have is more company and firmographic when you talk about a buyer persona in that market. And then you're also probably going to layer on function, which I don't know if that would come up as much for users, but I think of it a lot of the function on top of it. So human resources are typically dealing with a certain number of challenges. Salespeople might have another. Maybe you're selling to finance. And I think those two things overlay a buyer persona from a sales perspective versus I think user persona can be a little bit more identity specific, at least from what I've seen.
Do you think product managers know well enough those buyer personas?
I think it's hard to say and to make a generalization. I mean, when we spoke a little bit before, right, and I thought about where I've had really good partnerships with product managers, I do think it is when we're both very clear about who is our ideal buyer, because that's, I think, North Star you have to use to make a lot of decisions. And if you have product market fit, you should be getting inquiries from lots of different buyers. But as a company and as a leader, right, you need to make let's say a line in the sand in terms of which of those are your customers that you're going to prioritize. And maybe it's prioritizing internal resources like staffing, maybe it's a product thing, but I do think it's important. And sometimes the inclination is it should be the biggest customer, but I don't think that's always the case because your biggest customer can put a ton of constraints on all of these resources. I think in some ways it's more about saying, okay, our ideal customer is 50 to 100 employees, and we want to prioritize everything to acquire more of those rather than one company who's interested in us with 3,000 employees that we, mess up our entire funnel for everything else.
About those priorities, how do we make sure that the product priorities in terms of which clients we're targeting are aligned with your sales priorities?
I think as a sales leader, it's really important that you're filtering and you're kind of like the first line of defense in terms of what goes to product, because you should have the judgment and the perspective of what bubbles up from your team to those other internal resources. Like salespeople can very easily become squeaky wheels. I hate losing a deal as much as the next person, but you have to understand a lost deal that's, again, from an outlier situation that maybe we weren't planning to win versus like a lost deal. I'm seeing this every single time. This person told me X, and it would open up the door to 5 to 10 other X's. So I think it's a really important job as a sales leader to be that filter, but then to also kind of know what's on the table. Like, I think it's important to know what is of interest, and that way I can kind of pick those things out, because I do feel like before the roadmap is built, product people have a few things that are on their periphery, and knowing, oh, you want to hear if single sign-on comes up as an important thing. Okay, I'm going to clue in on that regardless of if my sales team's proactively bringing it to me. And that's kind of the importance of building a strong two-way relationship there.
So you've just touched on roadmaps.
Yeah.
Sometimes there is a bit of reluctance by product people to share the roadmap with sales people, because we don't want you to run around and sell things which are on the roadmap in 2 years' time, or we're not quite sure how much we can share with you. So what do you need from a roadmap?
Yeah, so I 100% agree with the statement that the full roadmap should never be shared with the full sales team, because there are always going to be those things. And as a salesperson, you got to push the line in the right time. I think as a sales leader, I should be able to have that judgment of what are we passing through or not. So I do believe that between product leadership and sales leadership, there should be full and open transparency. If you don't feel like you can share that entire roadmap with a sales leader, then I think that's an opportunity to revisit that relationship and understand what you need to do to build trust. But at the same time, and I can remember very clearly this exact situation happened to us last fall at Betterment, and I told my product person, like, take that detail out of our all hands. I did not want my team to hear this. I knew it was going to be distracting and not productive. And so there are times where it is the right call to move it out, but I definitely think the judgment call should be on the sales leader to be able to have that. And if we don't have that full roadmap, then we can't do exactly what I was saying before, right? If single sign-on is in the roadmap, but you don't tell me, then I can't selectively pick out those opportunities and give the right prospects to speak to, right? So I think it does really fuel the flywheel effect of sharing the right information at the right time.
Okay, so the SSO is an example of something you want to know about. What is an example of something that is distracting for you as a salesperson?
So I think in some ways what's most distracting are like the biggest ticket items that are going to help us close deals. So I'll give an example about this since it's public now, they started to bring it out, but Betterment has started offering a student loan offering. When I was a salesperson at Betterment, I was really excited about this as a differentiator and also really excited that the market needed it, right? We know that student loans are a huge challenge for employees in the United States. And I thought my prospects were going to be really excited by it. And it was a great thing to sell because not a lot of providers in that space were thinking about 401ks and also student loans at the same time. As soon as I heard about it, I was incredibly distracted. The time frame for it to come was pretty soon, and it was something that I knew was going to have a lot of opportunity. And if I was going to be so distracted about that, I had a pretty strong inclination my team was going to be too. And so I think it worked out pretty well that there were a couple situations with really big prospects on longer buying time frames where we did talk about it. But it was the type of thing where, like, just my own enthusiasm, I could tell that the sales team were going to feel the right way, and we had to be really selectful and thoughtful about how we were going to start to tease it out into the market.
So how do you deal with moving timelines in roadmaps? Because sometimes you don't exactly know when a feature is going to come up, and sometimes the roadmap changes, so one feature which was planned may end up being pushed back.
Yeah, so I'm a big believer of, you have to be transparent with your prospects too. I think that sales sometimes doesn't have the best reputation for setting expectations. And sometimes it's, not even with malintent. It's just that you're not using the product, you're not as entrenched in it every single day. But if your sales team isn't trying to set customers up for long-term success, then you're not building a scalable business, right? It shouldn't be about getting that quick win. It should really be about long-term success. And I think that salespeople have to be transparent to make that happen. So I think that's one piece of it. And then it's also really important to know, some things like onboarding timelines for what you're trying to deliver. So at Betterment, oftentimes, it could take 2 to 3 months for for a customer to go live. That gives you a lot of flexibility in a product roadmap in terms of what you're talking about. Let's think about Zapier, one of my favorite tools, right? My expectation with Zapier is I'm going as soon as I put in my email. And if you're selling a product like that, to talk about something on the future roadmap is a lot more precarious, right? So transparency is important, but I think some of it does depend on the user experience and what the customer needs as well, how they interact with your product.
So we've talked about how you use the roadmap. Now, you gather a lot of information from the discussions with prospects and with clients. How do you want to feed into that roadmap?
Yeah. So I think it's hard. I've never been a person who thinks we have to do it in a very systematized way, especially because in sales, it's not always about the number of things, right? It's not necessarily about saying you have 10 prospects that told you they want, student loans, because maybe 8 of those are not our target audience, right? So I don't think it's a quantifiable thing, but I think there should always be a regular cadence that we know to expect. I want to know, when are you starting a new roadmap? Do you plan quarterly? Do you plan semi-annually? When are the opportunities to have a discussion before things get finalized, right? So it's almost a little bit more of that timeline. And then also understand what the ongoing cadence is, where I can bring things up that are top of mind. Because of course, like you said, deadlines get pushed back, but also the best of laid plans, you never know what could come up. So what's going to be that right cadence? Where is it once every other week where I can bring things up, throw things out that maybe I've heard of to kind of bounce ideas off of each other informally.
Okay, and I've witnessed some cases when sales needed a particular feature to close a deal. What's your view on that?
Yeah, so I think this was where your filter comes in as a sales leader and maybe as a sales rep too. I think that each individual salesperson could start to build up their own credibility, right? You can't ask for that feature every single time. It's I think we talked a little bit about this before, right? Cross-functional relationships are like a bank account, and you can't withdraw them every single week, because then you're going to lose credibility. No one's going to trust your insight when the right thing actually does come along. So I think if you've built up this bank account of trust, and then okay, this feature request is I'm really withdrawing for the right thing. I know this is going to be an amazing fit for us as a company. They're our ideal customer, right? And they're definitely going to buy. Then I think you can really queue up those withdrawals correctly. But if you're just constantly asking for things that don't pan out, you don't close the loop. Oh, you deliver this for me and I didn't share if we won the customer or not, then I think you lose a lot of credibility. And that's where I see a lot of sales reps are more common to that, right? They haven't figured out what are the wants versus needs. How do I really queue up the big asks so that I can, cash them in at the right time to truly deliver value? And I think it's an important skill to have and develop as you build really strong cross-functional partnerships.
So about skills, what do you think make a great sales representative?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is active listening. If you're not actually listening to your customers and your prospects, then you're going to have a really hard time delivering value. And I think if you can actively listen, so that way you're showing your solution can solve that problem and you're very genuine there, you're more likely to have success.
Okay. Is there something around negotiation skills as well? Because sometimes as a PM, we also have to apply some of it to learn to say no to clients. So what piece of advice could you give me as a PM to better negotiate those kind of situations with clients?
Yeah, so negotiation I think is a real part of it. So I think confidence and conviction in your decision. And honestly, I think some of that comes through in your tone. How do you carry yourself? How do you deliver this? Inside sales world for sales, I'll say, right? The way you deliver pricing verbally and pause if you're doing a Zoom or a team meeting is really important, because they can sense, this is something where it feels like they're not so confident. And I think the same could probably be said of products, right? If you're saying this is the decision and and you're a little bit hesitant on it and you're stumbling a bit and then you don't pause. And of course, we're never going to be perfect in every situation, but I believe a lot of those body and verbal cues have a lot of impact on people's decisions. If it's something you're looking at, one of the best books I read recently is it's called Influence by Robert Cialdini. It's been around for like 15 years. And the book is all about, it was amazing for salespeople, but the ways you can use some of those cues to deliver influence. And one of the other most effective ways is social proof. So if you say, 3 other product managers have agreed with me, or like 3 of your peers feel differently, that's actually one of the best ways to also influence people's behaviors. But it's a really great book. I think I got a lot out of her sales rep, but would recommend for anybody as well.
Okay, great. I was about to ask you exactly that. How can we better practice confidence? Because sometimes, especially, I know we're going to come onto the topic that you're a founder now, and when we discussed the first time, you especially mentioned that there are not that many female founders. So sometimes women especially struggle to be confident. So how can we practice that confidence?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question, and it is so important. So I feel very fortunate. My parents were the type that were like #1 champions. So they always used to joke like, "You're the best in America," literally like family hashtag. And so I feel very fortunate. And I do think as a woman and now as a mom of daughters, like that has helped me a lot in my professional career because, stereotypically that's not the case for a lot of females, right? Imposter syndrome, all of those things happen. So the first thing that I think is really important that people who work for me, I always say is like, you have to watch out for saying sorry for things. And it's much more of a female trait, like sorry for bothering you, sorry for taking your time, just wanted to do that. And that's already implying that you're inconveniencing someone. And that's not the case. Like you're there to bring as much value. And then I do think like taking a seat at the table is a really cliche thing, but the more you participate and the more you speak up in meetings, the more you're going to be able to see people's cues and responses to you. And you have to start to build that voice and maybe build it in low impact settings, right? Speaking up with your peers, looking at how they respond, seeing if people take that, right? There's a lot of science in how to become a really strong communicator, but those are the soft skills that really take you to the next level. And I think it's important just to start. If you're feeling uncomfortable about it and you never participate in your team meetings, that's the #1 place that people need to start. Start participating in team meetings. Make a note to yourself that you should participate at least once in every single team meeting. Then take you to the next level, maybe in all hands, starting to ask questions. Maybe if you're a cross-functional partner with a customer, hey, I'm gonna really think about a thoughtful question, deliver it, and then observe, see how people react. Do they react or not? But make sure that you're taking up space in the conversation, and that'll really start to build your confidence, because all it takes is someone modeling and someone saying like, hey, Katie, that was a really helpful statement you just said. That's gonna really fuel those like kind of like micro behaviors to start to build your voice in yourself.
So you spent 7 years at LinkedIn, and then you moved to a Series C startup where you were the 7th employee. So what's the difference between being a salesperson in an enterprise like LinkedIn and being a salesperson in a startup?
Yeah, and there was another company, Transfix, that was a Series C first, and then I went to, because I was a 7th employee, it was a seed stage company. Okay. So just calling up. So I had a little bit of a stop. So it's interesting for me, leaving LinkedIn, I was so excited about what they had built. I learned so much, and I really wanted to try and build something on my own. This was an amazing journey. I was in the New York office when I think there were 50 people there when I started. When I left, it was 1,000. And just to see a company go through transformation, and transformation in the right way, with good leadership, with members first, and that's a really unique journey. So my first company I went to, Transfix, which I was there for a short amount of time, and it was a bit more mature. It had 150 people. And it wasn't the right fit for me, mostly based on the sale. It was a very relationship-driven sale, and that really wasn't my background. But I think what was so exciting about it is it was a very mature company, and it showed me how good I can be. I never would have gone straight from LinkedIn to such an early stage company where I was a 7th employee, or felt like I could have gone to a founder where I am now. But seeing kind of that middle tier really showed me how much I learned at LinkedIn. Like all of those observations of you're seeing, what does business operations do? How are they thinking about that? When I was at Transfix, it really showed to me like, oh, you know a lot more than you think you do. You can be more than just a sales leader. And I was excited about going somewhere a little bit earlier stage where I was going to get that exposure. Like it really kind of whet my appetite for Of course, when you are working in sales at an early stage company, closing business is important, but you were doing a little bit of everything, and that was really exciting for me. And so there was so much stress that went along with being an early stage employee there, especially, from a revenue generating function. I definitely felt like if we didn't hit our numbers, did anybody else have a job? And that felt, pretty heavy for me, maybe more than I needed to. But I love just being able to problem solve at every opportunity and thinking about what does website look like? How do we hand off to, you're just touching on every single part of it. And it was really fun to be able to solve problems and move quickly like that.
So do you think as a salesperson, you can sell any product or services, or do you have to specialize? Do you have to learn a particular area?
I've bumped around to several different industries, and it really has fit my intellectual curiosity. I think it does depend a bit on the product, right? As I was talking about a little bit earlier, right? Inside sales versus field sales. If it's a real product-driven situation, that's going to lend to somebody who doesn't necessarily have that deep industry expertise. Versus a relationship-driven sale, that speaks more to people that have spent their entire career in one industry. And so I think it can be a lot harder in those types of environments to move around. But, I'm always going to be biased to myself since I've worked in several industries. Of course, you can learn and figure it out, but some lean that way more than others. And especially with the rapid scalability and rise of how much software there is now, right? I think I was reading this in 2022 alone, Gartner predicts there will be $80 billion more spent in enterprise software. There are not, even the number of more salespeople needed to support that does not exist, right? There's a talent shortage in every single world, but a lot more people are going to be jumping into this career path. It should. It's a great career path where you can, provide for your family while also having fun, but it's not going to be possible to hire people with relationships at every step of the way. Absolutely not.
So you've now moved on to be a founder. So can you tell me more about your new venture?
Yeah, so my venture is focused on the challenges that go from buying a lot of software. Not all that surprising since that's where I built my career. But I was really fascinated when you talk to people about buying software, onboard, all that type of stuff. Things ended up being better if they could connect with somebody that they knew somebody who'd used the tool before, or they'd used it, or they found somebody in their network. And I was really fascinated by what's the product here of peer-to-peer interaction, right? How can you productize it to some extent, right, to make this happen in a scalable way, because there's so much value. And so what I've landed on that I'm very early stage at, we have one test customer looking at more, is what I'm calling community-led onboarding. And it's really built on the idea of two things. One, customers actually know the product sometimes better than salespeople and customer success people, right? They're living in it. They understand the value it's bringing to them. So how can you learn from that? And then the second is what I'm calling peer suasion. And social pressure really drives adoption. There are so many tools that everybody's using. I talked a little about the growth, but it's 40 to 60 applications is the average for an employee that they're using right now. And driving change to adopt new tools is incredibly hard. So I believe that learning from your peers is going to be the best way to make that happen. So really excited. Obviously, people participate a lot more in communities now. That's how you and I connected, to see how can we really deliver a community as a service from an onboarding standpoint, selling through B2B software firms.
So how does that relate to product-led growth that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, so I think there's a world where a community can be the interlay between self-service onboarding and needing high touch. Obviously, product-led growth has done a phenomenal job with just in-app education. Self-service onboarding is what you traditionally associate with it. And I think the technology to deliver that at the right time is really important. And that's a great education tool, right? What does this button do? How do I functionally figure out how to move this image from one side? But it actually doesn't show you what it can accomplish, right? And that's where I think community can be a really big complement. I don't think my fit is just for product-led growth companies, but I think there's a real overlay there in the fact that communities are very scalable, because a product-led growth world is going to be impossible to have a high-touch personalized onboarding experience. But I think with a community, we can meet them in the middle, right? Like having one CSM work with all the companies in a community could be a very scalable overlay, but still deliver a personalized response, plus learning more from your peers would be an ideal outcome. I'm trying to think about how to deliver right now.
But exactly, now you're in the driving seat as a founder and you have to think about the product. So
yeah,
what does that teach you about product management to be in that role now?
Yeah, so I'm in the phase of going from 0 to 1, and that's incredibly hard, right? Because you can have these grand visions, and how do you like actually get started? That's a very new thing for me. The ideas, I've always been an idea person, so that's the piece that's not hard, but like, okay, functionally, how do you deliver this? What does this next step look like? Is very interesting. Also right now, I'm a solo founder and I'm working on building these communities on Slack. So I have a leg up in the fact that I can do a lot of things without needing technical development and resources. So that's very helpful because I'm gonna have to take it to a next level when I'm looking to actually then need to coordinate technical resources, right? Like right now I can think about kind of the ideation, project management side of it. And then when I'm gonna have to go to like coordinating from a development standpoint is gonna be a whole nother stretch, which I'm fortunate I don't have to work on just yet behind it. But how do you get started? How do you take off these like little pieces? As a salesperson, I feel really good about selling the vision of where I'm going, but how do I like functionally get started and sell people when that's all I've got to? It's some new skills I'm working on.
So you mentioned using Slack because it doesn't require any development. You also said that you really like Zapier.
Yes.
So give me some examples of how you use Zapier as a salesperson and as a founder as well.
Yeah, so I think Zapier, people should be looking for it in all sorts of ways. Like, so one of the easiest things for me is just to copy events from one calendar to another, right? Like, it's very simple to do, and I'm managing multiple calendars. So, like, that's a very straightforward one that, frankly, I think a lot of people could do. Like, I tried to get my husband to use it. His work phone, he works for a bank, so it's separate than his personal phone. And I was like, can I please set up a Zap to copy every work calendar invite to your personal phone so you're not having these issues anymore? So that's one of it. I think some of the ways you could do forms into Google Sheets has, like, a lot of things for just like everyday uses that people are not doing. My first way I really got hooked on Zapier was actually to automatically generate proposals as a sales rep. So what we were doing is we used a Google form, Zapier, and then a tool called PandaDocs, which has a great free trial, great Zapier integration, and we could automatically generate proposals. And it was so much faster than the other way we did it. So little things like that. And then I use HubSpot a lot as a CRM right now. HubSpot has a lot of amazing, basically free content. And so I'll use Zapier to get things back and forth into HubSpot as well. And then also testing things on Slack, since I am, doing my business on Slack. If you're looking to do things in the free version of Slack, you can't like build a workflow, right? But in Zapier, you can have a new member automatically get a message, and you can still do that on free Slack with Zapier. So unlimited potential in terms of what you can do. But even the personal life stuff is kind of fun.
Cool. I love the focus on efficiency. And when you're a product manager, you also have lots of things to do. So getting those tools to help you manage your things, then it's very useful.
I mean, that's why as a salesperson, I got really, interested in how much software we need, because my team's time was the most important asset. And the more time we could spend with customers, the better we were going to be. And I thought it was so important and pretty amazing, just the amount of innovation and tools in every space, but definitely in the sales space. Like, things were so much faster for my team than when I started doing this 10 or 15 years ago. And I was really excited by the ways you could do that. But it's also surprising because it's still, until you have somebody really model that change, I think it's hard to get people, to actually realize the efficiency that can be gained out there.
One of the things that has changed over the last few years is also the access to data. So what kind of data do you use as a salesperson?
There's like the very obvious data, which would be like prospect information is easier to get than before. And we talked a little about like intent data. And I think stuff like that is very obvious. I think the more interesting way is some of the efficiency stuff, right? Outreach and SalesLoft, I think, do some of the best, right, ways of surfacing previous communications. What should you be doing there? Understanding how to improve your email communications, those types of things. The coaching software that's available on video recording, I didn't personally use one too much, but I think those are another area where helping people really improve performance by recording videos. And then the other one I've seen that's sprouting up are, I think the main one's Orem, is some of these like pre-call dialers that will help you. And so they will actually like vet phone numbers or help you call multiple people at the same time. And again, it's really all just about helping you do more with your time. So the more that this data can tell you the customers who to contact when, what's the right type of message, the more effective you can be at bringing in more business.
So talking about data, it makes me think about objectives and performance. Do you think there are instances where the targets that are set for the sales team may not be quite aligned with the targets for the product team? And what kind of conflict can that generate?
Yeah, I definitely think there are always. So I think you have the classic sales example is that sometimes sales is all focused on like KPIs that are activity driven, right? So I've never been a big fan of like measuring mostly by like calls or emails or activities because outputs are what matters more, right? So meetings, close business, right? I think that's the first example. But also you can close an opportunity, but it ends up not being a great customer. And I think that's usually where you see the biggest mismatch between sales and product, right? If they don't actually effectively adopt the tool, if they don't get an add-on, right? Like most companies need to have multi-year contracts in order for LTV to be what they want, right? So if you don't actually sell the right customer, which all comes down to like knowing your persona and being aligned there, I think it's very easy for sales to be in conflict with product. Maybe conflict's too strong a word, but be at odds, right? If sales is just, it's really hard when they're just focused on new business. How do you get sales incentivized for having long-term customer relationships and really long-term customer relationships with the right customers is a tricky equation.
So in the final part of this podcast, we have a bit of a fun section where I propose you several options and you pick one of them. So first one is sales-driven organization or product-led growth.
It's weird to say, but I think I would do product-led growth right now. I am a believer in sales assist because people do want to have the option to talk to humans, but overall I believe B2B buying is going to become more consumer-like. And I think the transparency, the ease of use, letting people discover a product whenever they want is the way of the future. It's not applicable for every single product, that's hard, but I'm excited about the evolution and I think the way that's going for buyer behavior.
So what would you tell salespeople who may be afraid of that shift? Like how can they embrace it?
Yeah, so I think salespeople should be excited about it for a few reasons. The first is, if you're in a product-led growth organization, you probably don't have to do much outbound work at all, right? You've got a burgeoning term of PQL, right? Products qualified leads. And so this is really your pool of untapped buyers, and that's a great place to get going. The second thing is should be easier to get customer testimonials, insights, connect with people who've used the tool before. If your product is easy to access, yes, free trials have all of their own challenges, but the likelihood is that people have been exposed to it before and there's going to be a greater affinity. Cue up how important onboarding is and why you need to invest in good onboarding and the pitch for the product that I'm looking to solve. But I do think that exposure is really nice. And it also, in some ways, an easier way to get into some of these big logos, right? If a traditional sales-driven procurement process to sell to a large organization could take years, 2 years, right? But with a PLG type of motion, somebody's like tested it out on their own, they've seen it. It can be a better way to kind of get those relationships going and also get ahead of your competitors. I think it's much more common that you see a very similar comparable product. And if your competitors offer this and you don't, then you can be in a disadvantaged position too.
Actually, about competitors and win versus lost deals, how can we better share this information with products? Because you have a wealth of knowledge about why you lost a deal. What's the best way to share that information?
Yeah, so I think the first thing as a salesperson is to make sure you're always getting this information and calling, right? It's so easy to say, oh, disappeared, went dark, whatnot. And some of that happens, but I think as a salesperson, if you have a lot of cold, went dark type of opportunities, you should be looking at yourself more closely. If that is how you're losing the majority of your deals, it means you're not staying close enough to your customers and you're letting things slip through the cracks. But a lot of people are open to giving that feedback if you've built up trust and you've built a relationship. So if you stay close to them, you should be getting that feedback. Two, if you're working at an early stage company, close loss feedback is the most important thing. And if you go to your product team member and you can't cite the 3 customers that told you specifically this, right? If you can't say customers, how big they are, who said it, what the exact situation is, you're going to lose a lot of the credibility and trust there. So I think those would be like some thoughts on why. And then probably to me, that's actually one where I do think Salesforce and your core CRM is the best place. That I think Salesforce is really hard for like the ad hoc feedback, right? The like, heard this on a call, quick note, this is coming up a lot. But closed lost feedback implies that there was an opportunity, there was a clear deal, and being able to track that in a way in Salesforce is not that heavy of a lift. I think that should be a pretty clear thing that people report on. It gets shared out pretty consistently, and salespeople should be able to hold themselves accountable on.
What I've seen is integration from Salesforce to Slack with Zapier,
Yeah.
where at least you put it in Salesforce and then it gets posted on a product management Slack channel.
That's honestly, and I wasn't thinking that before, but we had so much success setting that up, and I recommended that to a few other companies. Setting that up, having it be on a public channel where sales rep, if they don't have any information, it kind of makes them look bad, versus if they get really good feedback, product person comments, GM comments, manager comments, like tell me more. That's a great behavioral way to drive that information. So yes, I love that. And something that realistically everybody could have, right? Everybody wants to have that, and it's such a simple, easy way to get that information out. It's honestly, as soon as it's public, salespeople will start entering it better too. I wasn't thinking of that, so it's a good tip.
Good. I went a bit off track with my life and activity, but yeah. Okay, so next item is enterprise or startup.
Yeah, for me right now, I'm definitely in startup mode. I say right now because it could change. I joke all the time that if I just wanted like best return on my time in terms of how much money I can make, being a sales individual contributor at an enterprise company is a phenomenal job, and you can make a lot of money with less stress. So I think it's a great path for some people, but I am getting a lot of energy around problem solving and around working at a startup right now.
Cool. And final one, well, I think I know the answer now. Sales leader or founder?
Yeah, I'm still only a couple months into my journey, but I'm feeling really confident that I don't want to go back to work for somebody else ever again. So I think it will take a strong pivot, but I never rule anything out because I know that there's going to be peaks and valleys. And I'm along for the ride right now, but I never rule anything out, certainly.
Cool. So you're not going back to sales, and that's a shame because I think it would have been brilliant to work with you as a product manager. So you've touched on lots of points already, but if you have a final piece of advice for product managers on how to better collaborate with salespeople.
Yeah, so I think my rules, I would say, for any cross-functional collaboration is you need to understand what the person's goals are. And as a product leader, even understanding individual comp plans, right? Every company is different. Understanding the comp plans for the sales team could probably help you a lot, right? So that's going to drive what motivates individual sales reps and what motivates their leaders. So that's what I recommend for product people. And then for sales leaders, you should know the same thing, right? Is it making sure to hit milestones? Is it delivering something new, right? Each product organization really incentivizes something different. And so the better you can align and understand each other's objectives, the better you're going to build that great relationship and build trust, which is what everything is built on. And the other thing I'll say about comp plans is you can understand how people are compensated without asking how much they make. So everybody's comp plan will have like different KPIs or maybe accelerators here, or maybe it's a revenue number, right? You're not necessarily asking to understand how much an account executive on the team makes, but understanding the nuance of their comp plan, that's going to be what drives sales team behavior. So if you can get that piece aligned to any initiatives that you're doing product-wise, or if you're launching something new and you want to run an accelerator or a spiff on it, right, that's going to be the best way to really work towards driving that alignment.
Cool. And actually my job, because I'm launching a new product, I'm going to have soon the opportunity to have an input into the new compensation plan.
Nice!
So yeah, hopefully having product directly involved in the design of this plan would help being more aligned.
I mean, it's really hard. They're always hard to get because they are such a big, and it's a big part. You know, most new business sales reps these days at technology companies, 50% of their earnings are based on their commission plan. So that's a really big part of your pay. You have to understand a lot is at stake. Getting the right balance is hard, and you also don't want to be too complicated, right? So it wants to be easy to understand, but still motivate those right behaviors, and striking that balance is certainly an art that's different at every organization.
Cool. Thank you very much. It's been very interesting. If our listeners want to contact you or learn more about your new venture, what should they do?
Yeah, best place to reach me is on LinkedIn. I'm always pretty available there. You can have a link to my profile there. It's Katie Keate Johnson, all one word on LinkedIn. And that's really the best place to reach me over email. My LinkedIn inbox is the place I'm more responsive than anywhere else right now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. This was fun.
Thank you everyone for taking the time to listen to this podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that it has enabled you to understand your stakeholder and inspired you to better work with them to make successful products. If so, please share the link with your friends and colleagues. And if you want to suggest some topics, some guests, if you have questions you'd like me to ask during the interviews, or if you have any feedback, you can write to me at magalipellissier@hotmail.fr.